The one car that seemed like the obvious beginner choice in Le Mans Ultimate almost made me give up on GT3s altogether. If you've driven GT3s in other sims, you probably think you know which car to pick. But LMU is different, and also the recent tire model update has changed everything. GT3 is still the best class for beginners, no question. With ABS and more forgiving handling than the other classes, it's the ideal starting point. But with 9 GT3 cars in the game, choosing the right one for you lets you focus on improving way faster. I'm just an average sim racer myself, so I know exactly what it feels like to struggle early on. That's why I spent quite some time testing all 9 GT3 cars with the new tire model, and what I found was surprising, including one car everyone thinks is super difficult that's actually a decent beginner pick. For my testing, only 3 cars stand out as the ones I wouldn't recommend to new drivers. The other 6? They're all solid. Some just make the learning curve easier than others. So let's go through all 9, starting with the trickier options and ending with the ones I think give you the strongest foundation in Le Mans Ultimate. And remember, there is no real wrong choice. If you fall in love with how a particular car looks or just love the sound of it, don't let me tell you what you should or shouldn't drive. Sometimes the car that motivates you to get on track is more important than anything else. But let's now start at number 9 with the first of 3 cars that I wouldn't recommend to beginners, and that is the Corvette Z06. Now, I actually feel a bit sad putting the Corvette here because it's really underrepresented in online racing, and that's a shame. This car can actually be fast and it's genuinely fun to drive. It feels very agile and responsive when you get it right. Visibility isn't amazing, but totally fine. I personally also like the aesthetics and the sound, but judge for yourself. But here's the problem for beginners. Sometimes this car just wants to murder you. When you push it a little bit too much, the rear doesn't gradually slide, it just snaps away from you. Most of the time you're not gonna catch that as a beginner. It also can get really upset over curbs that other cars just shrug off completely. And even when you're getting on power out of slow corners, it sometimes decides it wants to spin out on you as well. Corvette fans might disagree, and that's totally fair, but here's why I think it's tougher for beginners. You're going to make mistakes. That's completely normal and part of learning. With the Corvette though, those mistakes get punished way more harshly than with other cars. This is why, sadly, the Corvette sits in last place. At number 8, the second car I wouldn't recommend, and this is the one I mentioned at the start that nearly put me off GT3s entirely, is the Aston Martin Vantage AMR. Now, if you've driven GT3s in ACC for example, this probably seems like an insane choice to criticize. The Aston Martin is literally one of the best beginner cars there. Stable, forgiving, predictable. It's the obvious choice, right? Well, that's exactly what I thought too. Don't get me wrong, even in LMU it's still a fun car to drive overall. It feels very balanced in almost all situations, and just listen to that amazing V8 roar. Visibility could be better, but it's manageable. But here's what nearly broke me. Coming out of slow corners. Even with the standard traction control settings, which are already cranked up super high, this car spins like a washing machine if you're not feather light on the throttle. You can catch it if you're experienced, but as a beginner you won't be able to all the time. And honestly, you shouldn't have to. A good beginner car shouldn't require super fine throttle control. And that's why I sadly can't recommend the Aston, even though I genuinely really like the car. It's just one of those frustrating cases where what works brilliantly in one sim doesn't translate to another. And here in LMU, the Aston just isn't a beginner car for me. Coming in at number 7, the third and last car I wouldn't recommend is the Ferrari 296. And this was actually a close one. I went back and forth on whether to recommend it or not. Overall, it feels very similar to the Corvette. It's fun and very agile with almost the same visibility, and the sound is also quite nice. The good news is it doesn't have the same problems with curbs or on power that the Corvette has. But sadly, it's also very sensitive to being overpushed, especially at mid to high speed corner entries, and that can really cost you. The car doesn't gradually tell you, hey, I'm getting loose, it just snaps into a spin and it's game over, especially for beginners. I probably could have put this higher on the list, but the snap oversteer behavior was just a bit too random at times. But these are all the cars that I would not recommend to beginners. Before we move on to the ones that I think work well, let me know if you disagree with any of my picks. And I know some of you will. Drop a comment and tell me why. I love hearing different perspectives, especially from Ferrari, Corvette and Aston Martin fans who really enjoy those cars. But now we'll start my recommendations with number 6 on the list and a massive surprise, but this time a pleasant one. The Porsche 911. I could have easily put this even higher on the list, as the next few cars are very close to each other. And before you start typing, the Porsche is impossible for beginners, hear me out on this one. The Porsche really is its own thing. It has great rotation on corner entry, but is way more stable than I remember it being from other sims. Visibility is good, apart from the top left display that blocks your view a bit, and the typical Porsche note is just awesome sounding in my opinion. The only real problem of the Porsche is understeer on throttle. Quite a bit more than all the other cars. It's like the car is saying, nope, we're going straight now, when you're trying to get on power too early. So you really have to drive the Porsche differently to account for this amount of on-power understeer. It's manageable once you learn it, but it does need some practice to get used to. The Porsche can still bite you if you overpush, but honestly not more than a lot of the other cars that are coming up higher on this list. It is one of those cars that you either love or hate. There's usually not much middle ground. But contrary to my expectations, I can actually recommend it to beginners, if you want a car that feels completely different from the rest and you're willing to put in the time to learn its quirks. Moving up to number 5, we have the Ford Mustang. This is the first car that's free if you have the base game, so it doesn't need any DLC. It's a very decent choice, as it's quite a balanced car. I'm personally not the biggest fan of the Mustang. And I know that's probably controversial, but that's just my personal taste, both from a driving, aesthetics and sound perspective. The Mustang is a solid choice to start with though, if you want a front-engine car and you're just on the base game. The only thing holding it back from being higher on this list is that it's sometimes quite sensitive to curbs. Not as bad as the Corvette, but you still need to respect them. If you're a bit careful with those, in every other aspect, the car is quite well behaved and predictable. It's just an overall good middle-of-the-pack choice. Nothing spectacular, but nothing that'll catch you out either. If you're on the base game without any DLC, don't worry if you don't like the Mustang. There is one more for you and it's even higher on this list. But first, coming in at number 4 is the Lexus RCF, one of the new additions with the last update. It has good visibility and that great V8 sound again. You get typical front engine behavior here. Kind of similar to the Ford or the Aston, but it doesn't have that low speed on power spinning problem like the Aston does, which is great. Overall, it drives quite nicely and feels balanced. Sometimes it can have problems over curbs or when you over push, but not nearly as bad as the Corvette, for example. To me, it feels a tiny bit better than the Mustang, but really not by a lot. In reality, you could easily swap their positions on this list and you really can't go wrong with either. Now at number 3, it's the Lamborghini Huracan Evo 2, the other new car from the last update. This is quite a fun one, nimble yet controllable. It has good visibility for a mid-engine car and a big plus is no windscreen wiper in your view. The awesome V10 sound speaks for itself, I think. Driving-wise, it feels a bit like the Ferrari in terms of agility, but crucially, it's not trying to kill you as much. It can still bite you if you really overdo it, but it gives you a bit more warning before it lets go. It's the second best mid-engine car for beginners in my opinion, and honestly quite enjoyable to drive. In second place we have the McLaren 720S Evo, which is the second free car for base game owners. It's hard to believe this is a mid-engine car with how rock-solid stable it drives. Good visibility once again, just like the Lambo. I personally like the ACC sound of the McLaren more, but it's still good here. The McLaren for sure is not as agile as the Lambo or the Ferrari, but you won't find a safer mid-engine car than this. No major problems to speak of, other than maybe a bit more understeer than the other cars, apart from the Porsche. Easy second place and absolutely the best choice if you don't own any DLC yet, unless you prefer the sound or the feel of the Mustang. And finally, in first place we have the BMW M4. Still the undisputed king for a beginner car in my opinion. The most balanced and tame out of all the GT3s. Visibility is okay and sound is decent, though not spectacular compared to some of the others in my opinion. But it just drives so incredibly well. No other car do I find this easy to go fast with consistently. There are almost no flaws. It's stable from low to mid to high speed. The only thing that can really catch you out is curbs, but you have to attack them very aggressively to really challenge this rock of a car. Now I know some of you might be thinking the BMW is just boring, and look, I get it. But sometimes boring is exactly what you want when you're learning. This car just lets you focus on improving your driving instead of fighting the car. And that is why it's my choice for the best GT3 car in Le Mans Ultimate for beginners, and the one I settled on to begin my LMU journey with. If you're just starting out, you really can't go wrong with the BMW M4. And if you don't have any DLC, the McLaren 720S Evo is the best bet and a really great choice overall as well. Does that mean you shouldn't consider anything else? Of course not. As I said throughout this list, there are plenty of good cars for beginners in the GT3 category, even the Porsche with its unique character. Remember, the most important thing is to pick a car that motivates you to get on track and keep practicing. even if it's the Ferrari sound that gives you goosebumps every time you start it up. Maybe learn to deal with the snap oversteer and have fun with it. As I said, there is no wrong choice. But I hope I was still able to help you choose your GT3 car one way or another. If that's the case, please hit the like button and let me know which is or was your starter car and why. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel for more sim racing content like this. And if you want to see my own journey through LMU's multiplayer races, you can check out this playlist. But that's it from me. Thanks a lot for watching. I've been HD Racing, and I'll see you in the next one.